Welcome to the Dose of Good podcast, where we celebrate good people and organizations working to make the world a better place. It can be easy to get caught up in the bad things going on in the world and forget about the good happening all around us each and every day. I'm your host, Erin, and I want to share these stories with you and give them the attention they deserve. I hope this podcast educates and inspires you and maybe even motivates you to share a dose of good in your community. Now let's get into today's episode. I'm very excited to share today's episode with you. I feel as though this was the best interview yet. They shared a wealth of information. This is also one that is personally close to me, as I have a family member who is an organ transplant recipient. And I'll tell you more about their story in the episode. This is an amazing organization and an amazing cause. And after listening to this episode, if you are not already an organ donor, I hope that you will go and become one. It's a very easy process, and there are multiple ways that you can do it, and there's really no reason not to. So I hope that you will go and do that if you haven't already. And I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. I would love to hear your feedback, and let's get into it. Today I'm here with Matt Boger, Director of Government Relations at New England Donor Services, as well as Erin Garrity-Contino, heart transplant recipient. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you
for having us.
So could you start by telling us a little bit about the mission of New England Donor Services?
Sure. First and foremost, Erin, thank you so much for having this. Presenting information regarding organ donation is one of the critical factors that we have. We want to educate the general public, but I've got to say that your podcast, Dose of Good, is wonderful. It's a great way to share important issues and to kind of celebrate important ideas. So we fall right into that. We are New England Donor Services. We are the federally designated organ procurement organization responsible for the identification and transplantation of organs and tissues throughout New England. We are pleased to be very active in all 6 states, including New Hampshire, and have great relationships at all levels. We did an event with your governor fairly recently, worked very closely with your Department of Health, the DMV, and truly every legislator within this district. Our mission is to help help save and enhance lives through the miracle, what I call, of organ transplantation. Now, one of over 50 federally designated OPOs throughout the country. Hospitals are federally required to contact their one OPO when someone has passed away, and then it is our responsibility to figure out if that individual would be a candidate for a miraculous organ donation. I do have to say that organ donation is very, very rare. It does not happen often. In fact, only 3% of all deaths happen in a manner where one could become an organ donor. That's not that they become an organ donor, but has the potential of doing so. And our mission is we have over 340 staff throughout New England. We are the Minute Men and Minute Women of yesteryear. We have an office that's open 24 hours a day, 400 days a year. I know that's more days than there are in a year, but we have a vigorous staff who is working to receive those phone calls for hospitals and helping save lives. And then we jettison our staff, no matter what part of New England is, to help identify organs and making sure that they'd be an appropriate match and transplantation for the over 100,000 individuals in the United States waiting for a life-saving transplant, and here in New England, over 6,000 individuals waiting for a transplant.
And how did you become involved with the organization?
You know, I had worked in government relations and public health efforts, and honestly, it was something that the mission called me. I personally, at that time, did not have a connection to organ donation. I have the great privilege of working with individuals, our wonderful volunteers who've been personally touched, both individuals who've received transplants and those who've lost loved ones. And I got to tell you, Aaron's a great example. I've become friends and really cherish the opportunity to share those stories and through their stories, create action. Organ donation is fairly unique compared to any other healthcare issues, and they're all important. Cancer, AIDS, even ticks. Department of Public Health deals with a lot of kind of broad issues. We stand alone in two very specific ways. One is we're not looking for a cure. We know what that cure is, and sadly, if someone is not utilizing those organs, aka has passed away, there is an opportunity for them to truly save someone else's lives through that wonderful gift. And when we talk about donation, we are a nonprofit and do accept donations of any kind. But what we're talking about is registering as an organ donor. And it's not a financial thing. It's one who believes that they could help save someone or have that heart on your driver's license. And I just want to make sure it's clear that this heart on your driver's license and the idea of registering is the idea of hope. It's not the idea that you will become an organ donor. In fact, organ donation is so rare, statistically, you're more likely to need a transplant than to become an organ donor. But the idea of registering is the idea of providing hope and this idea of community good, that you can help save someone else's life, and the idea of legacy. Your legacy carries on through someone else's is what we do. I definitely want to make sure I'm going towards your agenda, but the idea that we work and required to work legally with every state in the United States in presenting that question. We are the only public health question presented in a state document that's seen by the vast majority of people here in New Hampshire, here in New England, and in all states in the United States. Would you like to register as an organ and tissue donor at the DMV, BMV, or RMV, and again, in all 50 states? 98% of all people who register do so through the state agency of the DMV, BMV, or RMV. So our relationship with them has to be strong, and in fact, is extremely strong. The director of the DMV has been wonderful. As I said, Governor Sununu has been a great champion, as have the previous governors. We are non-controversial. This is an idea of truly helping save someone else's life. Our motto is donate life, which means we don't want anyone to pass away, period. Someone passing away or dying and saving someone else's life is a zero-sum game. Sadly, people do pass away, and once they are proclaimed dead, there is an opportunity for them to help save someone else's life through that gift of organ donation. And I do have to share, I don't want to get too deep in everything, and I want to make sure Erin gets her wonderful opportunity to talk. Organ donation can only happen in a controlled setting, in that they need to be put on a respirator. So even though they've passed away, blood and oxygen is running through their organs through a respirator, maintaining those organs, providing the opportunity for them to be transplanted. So we often have I'm frustrated. And there was a case where someone had passed away skiing in Colorado, actually a resident of Massachusetts, and the mother obviously missed her son greatly and was just so frustrated that even though he's registered, why didn't he was able to become an organ donor, kind of sharing this opportunity of something awful happened, that something miraculous could happen. And if you're not in a hospital setting, we cannot control or sustain those organs. So if you die in an accident or a car accident, those are not going to be viable opportunities to become an organ donor. There could be an opportunity to be a tissue donor, but one needs to be in a hospital setting. And again, there's the idea of I'm very excited to, when I pass away, that can be passed on to someone else. That's a great idea and mission. Again, the idea of registering is the idea of hope, but one needs to be in a very controlled setting and very controlled circumstances. And the idea of organ donation is one that does not happen often. And a lot of people get their information. In my day, it was ER. In today's world, it's Grey's Anatomy, and you get a lot of information, which, again, those are great TV shows. They are soap operas, and I often am a little concerned of all the information, medical information people get from those TV shows, and realizing that there is a lot to deal with, and we want to make sure that organs are appropriately given to individuals who are in need. We do have 18 people die each day waiting for a transplant. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you highlighting that because I know in the past I had some misconceptions
Yeah.
about organ
Right.
donation, and I myself was not an organ donor until I had a family member receive organs and learned more about it, and now I am.
Mm.
But yeah, I think it's important that people understand what exactly it means when they're checking that box at the DMV or wherever it may be. I'm going to jump around a bit because
Please.
to stay with what you're discussing. So, if someone wants to become an organ donor, that's all they have to do is how do they get on like the registry list?
Yeah.
Is that getting them on the list?
Yeah,
Or
great. And would love to hear about your story as well. Often organ donation, people don't get into the details until they're faced with it. But to register as an organ donor, there's one of actually several ways. So the most popular one is when one gets their driver's license, ID, or real ID. And that question here in New Hampshire is, would you like to register as an organ and tissue donor? That box is checked. That information is held by the state and then uploaded to our secure system on a weekly basis. So then the OPO, which is us, are the only ones who can access that data. So police, fire, even the hospitals have no access and cannot identify as someone as an organ donor.
okay,
So I do hear is like, oh, I'm going into the hospital and, I'm going in for surgery. I don't want them to take my organs. That's more of a joke than anything else. But the only ones who can determine if an individual is a registered organ donor and move forward with that is the federally designated organ procurement organization throughout the country. The DMV does a great job of collecting that information, but then they share that in a protected site. One can also register at registerme.org. That is the national site that collects all that information, and again, a protected site that one could be determined they're a registered organ donor. I will say we have been pleased for, over 6 years, it might be even longer than that, working with Apple on your health app. You can register as an organ and tissue donor, and again, that is shared through the secured national website where the OPOs can identify to see if someone is a registered donor. Now, in New Hampshire and through our effort is to have over 50% of individuals in the United States as registered organ donors. New Hampshire, we're actually about 55%, which is great. New Hampshire is a giving state. We do think you can get to 60%, so we encourage everyone to register. I will say that we work very closely with the federal government, HRSA, Health Resources Services Agency. Every 5 years, they put out a national poll, and that indicates that 90% of the American population supports organ donation, and if presented an opportunity to register, they would. There is a massive difference between 50% nationally, and again, kudos to New Hampshire being 55%, and 90%. So what we tell the DMV is that 9 out of 10 people who come in to the DMV are presupposed to register as an organ donor, and we encourage people to do that. The thing is, people get very focused and they want. In DMV, I think the DMV does a wonderful job. Very pleasant. The staff is wonderful. I know people get a little anxious to go there, and kind of they're so focused. But to making sure that they interact with the question, know what the question's about, and register. Organ donation is a voluntary choice. You can say yes, or you don't have to check that yes box. But that being said, it's not a neutral choice. Both the state and federal government strongly supports it and provides the easiest way to register, and that is on a state document that literally almost everyone has over the age of 16 or 18, a driver's license, a real ID, or an ID.
and what makes someone qualify to be a candidate for a transplant, and what's that process look like for them?
Sure. So 2 things. A, registering. There is no qualification to register as an organ donor. And in fact, that's not a health choice. That's saying that if one could utilize my organs, I would feel proud that they could do that.
Sorry, I mean the recipient. So someone who, say, needs a heart transplant
Sure.
or whatever it may be.
Right. So an individual, and I know Aaron can jump on this as well, an individual goes to a transplant center. The transplant center does a workup, and they're the ones who determine if one is sick enough to be listed to receive. Again, there's not one large list. There's a heart list, there's a pancreas list, there's a kidney list, and the hospitals are going to determine that. We as the OPO have no say in who's listed, and we also have no say on, so you are listed of how sick you are. It is our belief that the sickest patients should receive the organs. Our effort is to save as many lives as possible throughout the United States, period. So the idea of like, oh, you're 1, 2, or 3, we have no say or access, and it really is no way to modify that list. UNOS, United Network of Organ Sharing, is the one that determines that, and that's done through an algorithm that's determined by how sick that individuals are and a couple of other factors, blood type, waiting list, and again, what kind of organ that is. So we are the ones who just identify the organs. We see who's the one, number one on the list, and then offer those organs to the individuals. Then the doctor, the transplant doctor, she or he is the one who determines if that's going to be a useful organ for them to transplant.
Okay. And I'll get back to the rest later, but I want to make sure I get you in on the conversation. Yeah. So could you tell us your story of how you, maybe the cause of needing a heart and all that? So,
Yeah, so I have a big family. I have 3 older siblings. I was the 4th and the baby for a long time. All of my siblings and I got a cold at the same time. And my siblings all got better, and I just couldn't shake this cold. And one night my mom noticed I was having really labored breathing, and she just, had that mother's intuition that something wasn't right. So she brought me to the local emergency room, and I had an x-ray, and it showed my heart was gigantic in my chest, and my lungs were pushed to the side of my rib cage, which is why I couldn't breathe. And the local ED took one look at the x-ray and was like, we're not touching this. You got to go to a bigger hospital. So I went to a hospital in Boston, and lots of tests were run, and, different things were looked at, and there was never really a true cause for my cardiomyopathy. So the best guess was that the virus that all of my siblings and I had, for some reason, attacked my heart. So my heart was huge in my chest. The walls were really thin. It was really weak. It couldn't pump accurately. So for a year of my life, I tried different medications and procedures and everything to try to fix the problem, but it was always kind of a topic that maybe someday I would need a transplant. And then my heart started functioning at 1%, and I was put on an ECMO machine, which is, it's a machine that pumps and oxygenates your blood for you. So it was giving my heart a break. And I was listed for a transplant because I was at that point sick enough, and I waited 9 days. And I got my heart after 9 days.
That's amazing.
Yeah, which is very quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah, definitely. What was the recovery after the fact like for you? And now as an adult, what sort of maintenance do you have to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was 6 months when I was diagnosed, and a year and a half at transplant. And I was in the hospital for a little bit. My parents were great, obviously, and would rotate being at home with my siblings and being with me, one or the other. And then I got to go home to my family. So I was transplanted November 2nd, and I was home by Christmas.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah, so we got to have Christmas as a family.
Quite a Christmas gift.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously, for the first couple of years, it was very routine checkups, but now I'm 27 years post-transplant with my original heart, my original transplanted heart.
Sure.
And now I go in every 6 months. I have to take medication twice a day, every day, anti-rejection medication to make sure that my body doesn't reject my heart.
Sure.
But yeah, I take medication, I get my levels drawn, and I have an echo every 6 months, an x-ray once a year, and then every 5 years I go in for a cath, a biopsy. Well, so it's really not that much.
That's good to hear, and thank you for sharing your story. That's a great testament to organ donation.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So.
Yep.
And so some other questions I have are, as far as organ donation, is there one that's more commonly needed than another?
Yes, there. If you don't mind, can I just do a quick follow-up?
Oh, please,
How
yeah.
old were you when you received the transplant?
I was 18 months,
Okay, yeah.
and I'm old now.
Ah,
It's been 27 years. This year will be
Speak
my
for yourself,
28th
standing to me.
year
Yeah, you're not that
anniversary.
old.
Yeah. And since having my transplant, I welcomed a little brother, and I've graduated college and gotten married and became a mom myself. And I got to go to all my siblings' weddings, and I've had a very, very full life because of my donor.
That's amazing.
And my family is forever grateful for them, and I can't believe how blessed I am because of that decision that family made. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Children's Hospital does a wonderful job, and as the name indicates, they deal with youth, children. And again, miraculous. 27 years with a heart. And if you saw her on the side in the sidewalk, you'd be like, you had no idea that she had a very
Oh, yeah.
significant transplant, living a wonderful life. Becoming a mother yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, the things you can do with these wonderful gifts.
Yes.
I will share as well, and again, Children's, as of all the hospitals in this region, are wonderful. New Hampshire's got some wonderful transplant centers. If you're waiting for a heart, New Hampshire doesn't have a heart program, so you'd be listed in Massachusetts. And again, we are fortunate in this region to have among the best hospitals, not in the world, but the universe. This is a really hotbed for that. On the flip side, 18 years old, organ size does matter. So that transplant was not an adult because that would have been too big of a heart. So on the other side, there was a family whose young child passed away and was able to share life and continue that child's legacy through someone else, which is truly miraculous. I've heard working with Children's quite often that when there is that unfortunate event where a child of any age, anyone passing away is awful, but a young child even maybe more so. That is a hard thing for the family, but to a T, those families realize that smaller organ going to another child is something that they do without hesitation, and realizing their loved one again continues to live through someone else. And 27 years is just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So how does that work? So since it was a young child, does the heart then grow with you as you? Oh, that's
it grows
amazing.
with me.
Amazing?
Yep.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I guess that's another question I had is the process, other than, size of the organ, is the process different for a child than an adult, or does it go through the same process?
It is the same process. Again, size does matter. So
Right.
if you are a child, specifically for a heart, I think they'd match that very quickly. I will say, which is wonderful, 9 days is very, very, very quick. The waiting list for organs is sadly very long. The amount of need to the amount of opportunities to have organs is very long, and that's determined on different things. So you had mentioned what organ's the most in demand. I will say it is the kidney.
Okay.
And in fact, a little over 80% of all people on the waiting list are waiting for a kidney. And in some areas, that waiting list is over 5 years long. So it can be very long. And heart, I think, is over 3 years. Again, that data is done on an annual basis and daily, so that it kind of moves around. But you're talking a long period of time. I will add the kidney is the most in-demand organ. Kidneys are unique because you've got two of them.
Right.
So we, as the federally designated organ procurement organization, addresses individuals who've passed away, so deceased organ donors. Because the kidney is such a great in demand, and because you do have two, there is the opportunity one become a living donor. And that's where you have one of your kidneys removed and shared with someone else. And loved ones do that all the time. And there's been a great increase of altruistic donors where they give to someone they don't know because they realize that the individual lives needs to be saved, and that organ can do that. When your kidney is failing, then you're on dialysis, and that can be very taxing on one's body. But we are very supportive of that and think it's wonderful. Reducing the amount of individuals on the waiting list is something that's wonderful. We want that waiting list to be zero. It is not zero right now. Sadly, people are passing away, and that is truly troublesome on all different levels. We will say that our organization, New England Donor Services, as is all OPOs, recover organs for transplantation, and we want to encourage hospitals to be as progressive and as appropriate as possible to try to transplant those organs. There is some statistics that we offer multiple organs to some hospitals, and they say, "Oh, we're going to wait for an even better organ," and we can understand the doctor's assessment of that, but we really do want no one to pass away, and to pass on an organ and have that individual die, we don't think is a great idea, but to making sure that we are providing the best organs viable, and the donors who are willing to give an organ, we think those should be utilized of the greatest capability as possible.
Mm-hmm. And
I do want to hear about your story as
I
well,
will-
though.
I
Yes,
will
yeah,
get to
is that the conclusion? Great, good.
I just don't want to forget.
No,
anything, but,
please.
So, are you able to know your donor, or does that always stay anonymous?
The family has the choice to decide if they want to share or not. So
Okay.
when I was transplanted, my parents reached out on my and my family's behalf, and they chose to stay anonymous.
Okay.
And then for my 20th anniversary, I sent a letter, and they're still anonymous.
Okay.
So it's up to their own discretion.
Sure. But that's nice that you can still reach out to
Yeah.
them if
Yep,
you
absolutely.
want to.
So what happens is the OPO serves as the middle person in this, and we encourage everyone, because a lot of individuals who've received an organ saying like, "How do you say thank you for life?" And my response is that thank you goes a long way. And a lot of times the families, even though they didn't respond, I know they received the letter, excuse me.
Right,
Sorry about
right.
that. And are so grateful. We've got to make sure that both sides are at a stage where they can meet. So the each writes a letter. We take out all kind of identifying information, then share it with those families. And those are really wonderful opportunities when they can meet. We do understand that on both sides, the individual received the organ and be like, there's no way I can say thank you. I can't do it. And family members, often really want to know where that is, where those organs are, and how it's being used and how it's being
sure.
thanked. And at the same time, some are just like, I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
And we can understand that, but we encourage to write the letters to let those individuals know, because it is truly a miraculous thing. So thank you for writing
course,
the
yeah.
letter, and I know that it might be disappointing to not hear back, but I can tell you those families care deeply about those letters and
I
cherish
totally
them.
understand.
Yeah.
There's no hard feelings. But
Yeah. Just some more specific questions as far as like the transplant operation. How long does that operation typically take?
Sure. Well, it's that is organ specific and case specific. So, I mean, and that's really a transplant hospital's information that would provide that. We once a case has been identified, we put it on the clock, and we want to move as fast as possible. Again, being in a hospital, being on a respirator, that organ can be maintained. But when we bring the surgeon there to receive the organ, and we actually have 2 fantastic surgeons on staff that do that quite often, we are not going to take an organ that we don't know where that's going to go. So when we receive that organ, we're going to move that organ as quickly as possible to the location where it's going to be transplanted, and we want to do that as quickly as possible. Additionally, before the organ's removed, there is a lot of assessment of that organ, blood drawn, et cetera, to make sure that that organ is viable, and that even if it's not a perfect organ, it's not going to make an individual sicker who receives it.
Okay. And this is something my family member wanted me to ask.
Oh.
Is pancreas transplantation a possibility? Is
Yes.
that something they can do now? Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
pancreas is a key one. Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't mind, there are a few
Yeah.
myths and misconceptions, because I
Please.
really enjoy, your comment is like, oh, I saw, I had organ donation in the back of my mind, but it never really hit me until someone was personally touched.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear that often. So I again, do a lot of events with legislators, etc. And like, oh, organ donation is great. And then they kind of like, are you a registered organ donor? Like, I don't know. And then they kind of go,
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I am. Or they go like, oh, this is an important thing. So again, go to the DMV. There's so much to do, and it is a box checked.
Right.
So it's one of those things that I think people forget. And nowadays in multiple states, you don't have to go in the DMV until 5 years.
Right.
So we really want and the DMV is an important spot because that's a place where you are kind of forced to think about it and make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
We do jettison people a lot to, go to registerme.org. You can register at any time. And people are like, oh, I really want to do that. But people's lives get busy. Mm-hmm. So then they go and they forget and they don't do that. That's a great opportunity to really make that decision to truly become the hope in someone's life. And again, the likelihood of you becoming an organ donor is extremely rare.
Right.
The other thing that we see is that people over the age of 60 register at a lower level than the rest of the population. We want to make sure that we inform people that you can register at any age, 60, 70, 80, 90. If you're 100, register as an organ donor just to provide that hope. I will say that a couple of months ago, we did transplant an individual who was in their 80s. That saved someone else's life. And there has been cases where people in their 90s have become organ donors. And actually, there was a case in Europe, I believe, that someone was a tissue donor of over 100. So providing that hope is wonderful. I will say that, because we live in this area and because medicine is continually evolving, things that people say, I'm too sick, you're not going to need my organs. I appreciate that, but we want to make sure that the doctors are one who assess that. So we encourage everyone to say yes and get that heart on your license. And this heart, which is a really good motto here, is one that you're becoming a member of someone who can provide hope, and you're part of a team that really cares about individuals. And the heart shows that you could donate a heart, and you've got that, but also that you have a big enough heart that you want to be a member of society that provides hope to someone else,
Sure.
even though you likely will not be it. But then on the flip side, if you needed a transplant, would you receive one? And I would guarantee that between getting a transplant or death, one would receive a transplant. But you also need to lean in and register and be part of that group. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're fine. I think I've covered most of the stuff, so before my final questions, I'll share my story with you.
Yes, please.
So a family member close to me, this was back in 2020, he was in his early 70s at the time, and found out that he would need a double lung transplant. The reason being, since a young age, he worked with birds, so it was kind of a hobby as a kid, and then at an adult age, not as a career, but just kind of a fun hobby again, he would band birds and kind of study them, and so you're having to physically handle them, touch them, that kind of thing. And evidently that's what caused the problem with his lungs. I don't know exactly what it's called, and it's very rare, and but something that they carry with them when you're handling them, it over the many years caused this. So he was kind of unsure if he wanted to do the transplant, partly because of his age and the risks involved, but it was pretty much either have the transplant or you don't have much longer to live. So he did eventually, after a few days of deliberating, decide to go on the transplant list, but they had said they have no idea how long it could be. It could be years, months, they just don't know. And he was very fortunate that it was only a week.
Wow. That's very fast. Wow.
Yes, yes. So this,
Where did he get the transplant?
Florida.
Florida, okay.
So in Gainesville.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So, and Gainesville's a little bit of a drive for them, but this particular hospital is one of the top for lung transplants.
Well,
Does
he live in Florida?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it was like the closest one that had a good reputation
great.
for. So he did the transplant, and then afterward, it was a few months that they had to stay very close to the hospital to be checked on all the time and that sort of thing. And then since then, he's back at home and can't do some of the things he used to do, has to be very careful about, like bacteria, so can't handle birds anymore, can't fish, which he used to love to do, things like that. But otherwise has been able to live his life pretty normally. Takes a lot of medications, those anti-rejection specific time twice a day, but then there's also a lot of others that he has to take. But he's gotten used to that and is fortunate for, the extra time in life that it's given him. So, yeah.
Well, that shows a kind of a neat thing where, individuals can become donors at older ages, and people can receive transplants because life is precious.
Yes.
And 5, 10, those years matter to
Yeah.
the individual, but it's also the pebble in the pond thing. The other individuals it affects
Right.
is great. And on the other side, the individual who passed on and gave the organs, their family feels like, oh, wow, their legacy is continuing on through someone else.
Right.
And that's a gift in itself, opposed to someone passing and it's a sad moment. But then the aftermath is like, wow, our loved one who we miss each and every day gave life to someone else. That's something to cherish.
Yes. Because also one thing I forgot to mention, prior to the surgery, he was on oxygen 24/7. And that's not a good quality of life for people,
Quality of life, yeah.
especially when you're wanting to go places and you've got this big tank and everything like that. So, so he was very fortunate, but kind of adding to what you said, it has allowed him to meet his grandchild, who he never thought he would have a grandchild, and now he's gotten to meet them, spend time with them, have time that he wouldn't have had otherwise. So it's very nice.
Life is about experiences, and these that's a great way to do it. I'm not a doctor, but I'm intrigued that he can't fish. What was that?
Well, he could fish. He can't handle the fish.
Okay.
It's something with bacteria, because also he can't, like, he used to love to garden. He can't do the gardening, all like the soil. So I don't know the reasoning behind it. I'd have to ask to get more details, but I know that those certain things, also like bodies of water, like going in the ocean. So I'm not sure exactly why, but that's something that he's been told. So is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I want to make sure that Erin gets to say a few words here, but just a couple things. So kind of the myths and misconceptions. We talked about the age thing. I do want to make sure that people can feel confident that registering as an organ donor is a safe, secure, kind of humanistic thing to do. And we want to encourage people to do that. We do know that, after COVID, people are more reluctant to do things. This is a really lean-in opportunity to engage in the general public. I do also want to say that all religions in the world support organ donation. It's the idea to really help save an individual. Again, you can make any decision you want to either register or not register. We just want to make sure people are providing that with the greatest information as possible. No matter what your health factors are, we encourage you to register. Again, that's not a medical choice. The doctors will assess that. Even if you have cancer, it affects some parts of your body than not others. Register as an organ donor. Let the medical professionals make that determination, because it truly can mean life. And again, we don't want anyone to become an organ donor. The heart is the idea of hope and saving individuals' lives. And I'll also just take a little bit what Erin said is that the recipients, the donor families and the donor is in their minds every day. And it's that they're the ones who gave them life. And in a lot of ways, they're like, I've got a second chance, and I'm really going to show the donor how I'm using my life and using it as the fullest. So it is truly the people who've been personally touched who are great advocates of this, to encourage people to register. I couldn't be more thankful for Erin being here, and she's always been a great advocate and sharing her story. So I didn't know if you wanted to say a few words.
Thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with everything that you've said. Yeah, my father unfortunately passed away a couple years back, and in the hospital, he was the biggest advocate for, I'm gone, so take what you need. So I've been on the other side of it too, and it's hard and it's sad, but there is such hope that comes from carrying on in another life. I think of my donor all the time, every milestone, every day. When I got married, I had my doctors and my nurses and, people who have been with me on this journey were at my wedding and celebrating with me and thinking of my donor. And, when I welcomed my son, my cardiologist was one of the first people I called to say, hey, I have a son. And, we reflect on my donor family all the time, and they're always with us. I just think it's turning a sad situation into something that's hopeful and can maybe have a positive twist on something that's, maybe not the happiest moment for another family, but yeah, sure. They are with me all the time. So
that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reminded of two things we didn't discuss. One is, are there volunteer opportunities with your organization? And are there any fundraisers you might like to highlight?
Sure. We have got hundreds of volunteers throughout the region, both individuals personally touched by donation and individuals who want to get engaged in a good cause. We do a variety of different things quite often. We have a lot of events with legislators to kind of share those stories and get that information in the media and share real life experiences. We actually just did our first golf tournament on Monday. And at each tee, there was a little story about people who've been personally touched by our organization. We had family members able to share their stories with everyone at each hole. It was really, really meaningful for both the golfers and the participants. We do have two 5K races in Massachusetts and in Connecticut, and looking to do more of those. Actually, we were at Polar Park where the Paw Sox play. It was a great event, to celebrate, and it's when those families, both, again, individuals received and the donor families, come together and truly celebrate their loved ones. And we have kind of consistent on a weekly basis our volunteers going to hospitals, going to schools. We lecture at universities, nursing schools, tabling. There's so many things to get involved with. We have ambassadors that go to the DMVs throughout the region to say, thank you for asking that question. You make a big difference. They have access to hundreds of people on a daily basis, just verbally asking, would you like to register as an organ and tissue donor? The amount of volunteer opportunities that we have is numerous, and we encourage people to go to our website, neds.org, to participate. Actually, register as an organ donor, which we'd love you to do. B, participate in a cause that is greater than oneself. I will say that this is a fantastic organization, and we are hiring. So if an individual of all sorts are looking for a career that really means something significant and greater than themselves throughout New England, look at our organization. It is truly marvelous. You said, I think you were like, well, how did you get involved? And I have to kind of rethink how I did. But this is truly something that I feel passionate about, and truly something that affects so many others. So it's been extremely rewarding in that fact. So thank you. We love volunteers and people to get involved.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And just because you mentioned meeting with them, is there legislation that pertains to organ donation that people should be aware of looking out for?
Not specifically. We do a lot of work. So in the past, we've talked a lot about, organ donation is important. We did realize that the people behind that is an important group to know. So we are a little bit more that we are New England Donor Services, the federally designated organ procurement organization that's responsible for it, and educating both legislators and leaders. And actually, New England, I think everyone knows us, and in D.C., what we do, and actually the important work that we do behind the scenes. Because, again, going back to Grey's Anatomy or ER, it's like, here's an organ, just put it in someone else's house.
Yeah.
It's not that easy or simple.
Right.
There's a lot of process that goes into it, and we're happy to talk to anyone about that. But the easiest step is to just register to help save an individual's lives. But we don't have any budgetary items where it doesn't cost anyone anything to do this. But we're happy to answer questions that anyone has. Sometimes there's good ideas, sometimes there's not so many good ideas, but we ask legislators to kind of talk with us beforehand because there's some things that are good intent but may not be great public health policy initiatives, and we're happy to engage anyone, anytime, 24 hours a day.
All right. And the final two questions I'd like to ask everybody, first being, which nonprofit do you think we should feature next?
That's a good one. So I'm going to say NKF, National Kidney Foundation. We work very closely with them, and they focus specifically on kidneys, and we happy to do that, and we represent all organs. But staying on topic, I think they would be a neat one to have a conversation with. We also partner with a lot of organizations, Red Cross, that do blood drives. There's a table, and I will say giving blood's fantastic. Registering as an organ donor is even easier.
Yes.
I respect all doctors. I'm not one for needles or blood, so that making me a little. But the public health sector is a really important one, and I do want to thank you for just bringing it attention and educating people about this. Because just knowing a little bit about something, there could be something. Well, I have a question. I wonder how I would pose that. We're happy to answer any of these questions and realize that this is a really truly humanistic thing to do. But
Sure.
interested
Yeah,
in who
it's
you would
amazing.
say.
Yeah, I mean, I fully support those as well. Maybe Waypoint. I used to work there before I welcomed my son, and I was in the early childhood division, so it's working with new moms or pregnant moms, and it just helps support the family as a whole. And it's a very rewarding job where you get to help with bonding and attachment and developmental milestones, and it supports families, which I'm all about. So
I love that. I haven't heard of them, and they
Yeah.
sound like they'd be a very helpful organization to new moms. So I'll
absolutely, and
definitely look into that.
they cover a lot of other things too.
Oh,
I'll just say
great.
that. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And they hired her, so you know it's good.
Yeah.
Yes,
You know
yes,
it's a good organization.
definitely. And the last thing is hard and easy at the same time, but what is the kindest thing you've ever witnessed or been a part of?
The kindest thing. I'll let Aaron go first on this
Oh man,
one.
I mean, my answer is obvious. It's my
Yes,
donor
yes.
family. But outside of that, I would just say, I don't know. It's about my mom. She took in my little brother and made him a part of our family, and that's something that I've always admired. And he's 9 now, and he is finishing school this week, and I'm excited to have the summer with him. So yeah, just my mom being the person that she is, that even after having a difficult child like me, she had room in her heart to welcome my little brother. So
Yeah, that's incredible.
yeah,
Great story.
yeah,
God bless your mom.
Yeah.
So staying on message, I have been part of a lot of opportunities where for the first time the donor family meets the recipient. And specifically, we'll stay on heart for a second, even though all organs are vitally important, having a mother or father listen to their child's heartbeat or loved one's heartbeat in someone else is it's amazing. And something that kind of full circle of life. So I've done this for a couple years. I hear a lot of stories. Every time I hear a story, even if it's for the fifth time, it truly affects me. And it shows how valuable life is and how one can really share the love of life by registering or just getting this hard on. But I'm not sure it's appropriate to call organ donation a miracle. I see it as a miracle, and the results are fantastic. And even though there's a phrase, someone's worst day in their life, reversely is someone's best day. And to share those things together and having a family who grieves deeply, deeply, deeply about their loved one, having the idea that someone else is living and their legacy continues on is truly inspiring.
You've left me speechless.
Yeah.
That's
Good.
yes,
Well, thank you
yes.
again for this is an amazing podcast. I deal with a lot of media stuff, and I know that kind of the theme, if it bleeds, it leads. The idea of the goodness of things is so important to feature, and I appreciate the work that you do.
Oh, sure, and that's why I wanted to do it because the news cycle is so negative, and it can make you feel very hopeless because it's like, oh, there's all this horrible things in the world and it's so negative. So that's why I wanted to make sure, because I know that there is just as much, if not more, good going on than the negative, but you don't hear about that stuff because it bleeds, it leads. So I wanted to do my best and my part to highlight the good things.
Yeah.
So, and I thank you both so much for being here. You've shared so much great information with people, and I hope that people will go and register if they are not already. So thank you again, and
Thank
have
you
a
so
good
you so
much.
much.
Yeah, wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode about New England donor services. I hope you will find your local Donate Life organization to wherever you live and maybe think about volunteering with them or getting involved with one of their fundraisers. But most importantly, if you are not already an organ donor, I hope that this has sold you on the idea and kind of taught you about the process and any risks that were involved, which really there aren't in becoming an organ donor. And yeah, go and sign up today if you are not already one. Otherwise, be sure to follow Dose of Good Podcast on Instagram and Facebook to get all the latest information about podcast episodes. Please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts to let me know what you think of the podcast and to also let more people find it, because that helps Apple to know the audience and just suggest it to more people. I appreciate your support with this podcast. I really enjoy doing it and hope to continue it for a long time to come to highlight the good going on in the world and these amazing organizations and the incredible work they are doing and all the hard work that they are putting in to make the world a better place. I'll see you next time.